All right, welcome back to another week of the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. Man, believe it or not, it's already Week 16, championship week for everybody out there. Good luck in all your games this week. It's always fun that Week 16 championship weekend is always right around Christmas. It's like an extra bonus, an extra Christmas gift that you can get. And on the other side of the glass is always you folks know who I am. I'm Bob Lung, Big Guy Fantasy Sports. And on the other side of the glass, as always, with us is my good friend Ron Rigney, who is in a championship game this weekend. So, Ron, it's good to have you back. I hope all is well. And tell us a little bit about your championship in the Kings Classic this week.
Yeah, so able to put together a title game run in the Kings Classic Snake League. We got a nice little win over Chris Prince this week. So headed to the title game, playing Doug Orth from FF today, and I'm a little scared of that team. I was looking at his team on paper, and I got to say, I'm a little leery going in, but you never know what could happen. Like I say, you could have a big week from a guy you don't expect. Like last week, I would say my MVPs for the year. I never thought I'd be saying this, but are guys like Cole Beasley and J.D. McKissick
There you
are
go. Yeah.
guys that are putting up some big points. So who knows? Anything could happen. But yeah, it's cool to be playing in the title game for sure.
Yeah. Another big week for Darren Waller, or is that not the league you have him in?
That's not the one I had him
Okay.
in. Let's see. This week I was carried in that league, obviously by McKissick and Beasley.
Hmm.
I had to throw Leonard Fournette in because Zeke
There you
Elliott
go.
decided at the last minute he was going to sit out, and those two
Right.
Fournette touchdowns were huge. And
Yep.
just got solid production across the board, man. Got nice double-digit production. Of course, when you got Kyler Murray setting a career yardage mark, that's always good, and running a
Yep.
one in and throwing for a few. So had a lot of things go my way last week. So hopefully we
That's
can do
good to
that two
see
weeks in a
Kyler
row.
getting
And
back to normal. And
yeah, it was good to see him. He didn't run it a lot, but he did run into touchdown. But through the passing game for sure, it was definitely good to see him posting some. Of course, he's not posting 400 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns every week, but it was good to see
right.
him actually have some solid production through the air and get the ball to DeAndre Hopkins and looking a little
Yep.
better than he has the last couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens.
Definitely. And so that's a great segue as we get started this week. We look at our quarterbacks for year to date consistency. And Kyler Murray's big week of 40.20 fantasy points. There were three quarterbacks. Actually, you could even say four if you count Ryan Tannehill at 39.75. But with Tannehill and above, there were four guys that, basically at 40 points and above: Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, and Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill's been on fire as of late. Really has been looking good. His consistency obviously has been picking up now, but he's still only up to 57%. But definitely been a year of, but between quarterbacks and the tight ends, man, it's been a year of, I'll just call it inconsistency that has been a brutal scenario for us. But we'll tie it all together, and we'll get our picks as we head into 2021. Start working on the new consistency guide as we start, as always, right after the first of the year, and we'll start figuring out what quarterbacks are going to be the best picks for 2021. And I mean, we've said this. If we said it once, we've said it 100 times. This has been a unique year in the football world because of injuries and COVID and delaying games and postponing games and people, tons and tons of players missing, lots and lots of backups playing, especially at probably the offense and defensive lines. That has, just made it very, very difficult to get much consistency at all out of the quarterback and or tight end position. Running backs and receivers a little bit better, but like I said, it's been a tough year. And like I said, Kyler Murray took over the number one spot this past week. Now has 410.95 points, a little bit over 10 points ahead of Patrick Mahomes, who did earn a clutch game. Only 28.4. But like I said, Murray had that 40 banger, so that certainly pushed him back up ahead. After that, we got Aaron Rodgers, 86%, Kyler Murray, 79%, Russell Wilson, another down week, only 14 points. That's like four straight for him. Now he's down to 71%, tied with Deshaun Watson. Russell Wilson owners, I wasn't much of one in this but he certainly, if he didn't crash your playoff hopes before you got to the playoffs, he certainly has crashed them since it got to him. Your thoughts on Russell Wilson and the whole Seattle offense? What's happening with them?
Well, it seems like too, and we've talked a little bit about Russell Wilson in the past and how he's kind of a slow starter. It seems like it was the opposite effect this season, but it seems like when he's bad, he strings together 3, 4, 5 games where he's just inconsistent. There's no really nothing else to
Right.
say. And I think it's been a big drop off for Tyler Lockett as well. We've seen DK Metcalf kind of surpass him. I think is that wide receiver one. DK Metcalf's
Mm-hmm.
on a whole nother level, I think, as far as being an NFL wide receiver. But we were hoping that Tyler Lockett would be that complement, and he's had a couple of big games. But man, he's been missing as well. Been a lot of inconsistency in the run game. Chris Carson, when he's been in, he's been solid, but they've been having to go with Carlos Hyde. They've been having to they went with DJ Dallas a few weeks. So there's a lot of things going on there. I think not having a consistent tight end really hurts him
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit. So I think a lot of it has to do with the weapons that are around him.
Yeah, and without a doubt, as we go down the list, Justin Herbert's cooled off quite a bit. There was a point where he was right up there with the big boys, down now to 69%, eighth in total points. Josh Allen, 64%. Josh Allen, third overall in total points. In fact, he is less than 1 point behind Patrick Mahomes. That's a trivia question. That's one you can win at a bar right now. I would not have guessed without looking until I saw that Josh Allen was that close to Patrick Mahomes in total points this year. But like I said, only 64% consistency, which is tied with Kirk Cousins. Unbelievable. That just dumbfounds me that Kirk's even that high. That's probably his best he's ever had at 64%. But still, a lot of that has come over the last 5 or 6 weeks. Maybe is it the fact that he's connecting a little bit better now with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Even Irv Smith, he's had some nice, had him some nice games as well. What are your thoughts on Kirk Cousins? Is this guy somebody that we can feel comfortable going into next year as a possible QB1, or do we stay away from him? I'm thinking we stay away, but what are your thoughts?
I do like the fact that they were able to replace Stephon Diggs so quickly. I think a lot of people like Justin Jefferson, and he couldn't have fallen into a better spot. He just basically had a
Right.
starting position handed to him. And those LSU wide receivers tend to transition pretty well to the NFL. Say what you want about Odell Beckham, but he put up numbers there for a while. Jarvis Landry, we talked about him as well. So I think part of it has to do with that. I think for me, Kirk Cousins is going to be right on that cusp of a high QB2, QB1. I'm not really ready to go into a season, I think, with him as my starter just yet. But I do, like you said, like the fact that he's building that rapport with Irv Smith. Justin Jefferson has been, he is a contender for Rookie of the Year for sure. And then
Mm-hmm.
Adam Thielen getting back to his old tricks too. I think that's big as well. But I think a lot of it kind of like the opposite of Russell Wilson. They've actually put some weapons there that are pretty effective for him. Maybe Irv Smith even had a touchdown for you last weekend.
Yeah, I would say Irv Smith is certainly certainly becoming the main guy there. I mean, my thought is Kyle Rudolph will probably be retiring. I know he had talked about it last year, but it didn't actually go through with it. But definitely somebody again to kind of keep an eye on as we head into next year. Ryan Tannehill. Interestingly enough, last year, 75% consistency, but only 22nd in total points. Now, he did miss 4 games. Well, he didn't play in 4 games because basically he replaced Mariota. We thought the consistency would continue, and it's been the complete opposite. He's been more of a higher point scoring quarterback this year, as evidenced by his 7th in total points, but only 57% consistent. Kind of like Cousins. Is this a guy that we can trust as a potential late quarterback heading into next year, as maybe a guy that might be 70% consistent? We can get in round 10, 11, and he's put up some solid numbers, definitely big numbers as of late, but can we trust him going into next year? This is another guy that's intriguing me as I'm looking into next year, because next year, in my opinion, it's going to be the quarterback position and the tight end position, to me, is going to be almost exactly the same. You're either going to take a quarterback super high, Mahomes, Murray, Rodgers, somebody like that, Deshaun Watson maybe, Russell Wilson maybe, or you're going to go 10th round. Same way with tight end. It's either Kelsey, maybe Darren Waller, maybe Kittle. Well, Kittle's probably in because he'll be healthy, or you're going to wait to round 10. Is
See, it's one.
Tannehill a guy that we can rate to round 10, or is he not somebody we're even putting in the picture at?
I think I'm going to lump him kind of in that same category with Kirk Cousins. I mean, I think he's going to be kind of right around that. I think he'll be drafted more as a QB1 than Kirk Cousins will. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's that right there. Maybe Kirk Cousins is going to get forced down a little bit to where you pay a price for him that if you're willing to wait on quarterback, you feel okay. Maybe in a 12 or 14 team league, you get him a little bit later. But as I'm looking at Ryan Tannehill's stats here, I think I only have him in one league. It's a 2 QB league. But I
Mm-hmm.
I never would have thought at this point in the season we'd be talking about Ryan Tannehill with 31 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. That's pretty
Right.
respectable numbers, not turning that ball over. And the only other thing that worries me a little bit with him, and of course I think you have to look at it a little bit too with Dalvin Cook in the backfield with Kirk Cousins. You
Mm-hmm.
know that offense is ran around Derrick Henry, and you know Derrick Henry is
Right.
going to get a ton of touches, so that might eat away from it a little bit. But there's a few games too, despite having Derrick Henry, Tannehill's gone over 40 pass attempts in some of these higher scoring games. So
Right.
there should still be a little bit of meat on the bone there. But I think, and just with those two guys we've talked about, if you could get Tannehill and Cousins and maybe stream those two guys,
Yeah. Well, that
play
was my
matchups, I
thought
think
too.
that's pretty
Right.
pretty solid strategy there.
Right. I mean, I know, heading in this year, I was all about the Matt Ryan, Drew Brees scenario. Well, Drew Brees got hurt. Matt Ryan hasn't been that great. And the interesting thing is, Brees consistency wise, he's 60%. Ryan's only 43, but he's 12th in total points. He certainly has had some good games. He's tailed off as of late. But let's also think about the fact that, what has Matt Ryan had as a running game to protect him? Nothing. Gurley hasn't done
No,
anything. So, if they go out and get a good running back, let's say they go out and get a Leonard Fournette. I mean, Leonard Fournette's going to be, a free agent. Somebody's going to take him and somebody's going to benefit because this guy is good. He just hasn't really tried much this year, obviously, being behind Ronald Jones. I just don't think he's put in the effort. I mean, that's the problem with him is you've got, $1 million talent, 10-cent head. But, if they could, Leonard Fournette could go to Atlanta. Oof, that could be nice. But again, that's kind of stuff we'll have to be looking at as we head into the off season. But I just kind of want to bring some of these guys up as potential. What we're going to look at next year because, like I said, I really feel like the quarterback and tight end position is going to be one of those where it's either got to be early or it's got to be late, and there is really not much in between. All right, let's move on to the running back position. Like I said, there's definitely some names on here that probably were not starting, just like in the wide receiver position we'll get to, that were not in most fantasy rosters. Maybe Tony Pollard was because they probably had him as a backup or a handcuff to Zeke Elliott, took the number one spot. J.D. McKissick, you talked about, Giovanni Bernard, Salvin Ahmed, Benny Snell, Ty Johnson, Chase Edmonds,
Mike
Le'Veon Bell,
Davis.
Mike Davis, Jeff Wilson, Frank Gore, who is 103 years old and is still putting up fantasy numbers. So a lot of guys this week, obviously, like you said, we're helping nobody but themselves in the fantasy world. But as we look to the year-to-date totals, Dalvin Cook's still perfect. The only perfect guy that's at least played a number of games. I mean, Christian McCaffrey's still perfect at 3-3 because he hasn't played all year. But James Robinson, then they're at 93%. This one's going to be an interesting one. Is where is James Robinson going to be drafted next year in the 2021 fantasy drafts? Is he a top 12? Do we have that much confidence in? I mean, he's fourth in total points, 93% consistency, garbage quarterback. Now, granted, they're probably going to have Trevor Lawrence or whoever. Um, so, does it matter with this guy? He seems to do very well without the quarterback situation being all that in sync. So, is James Robinson, is he going to be a top 12 pick?
I think so,
Or
and
top 12 running back, I should say, not top 12 pick.
I think so. I mean, it's something where going into the season, Jacksonville doesn't do a lot of things right, but one of the things that they did right was let go of Leonard Fournette in favor of this guy.
Mm-hmm,
They
right.
knew enough to see what he was doing in training camp. They knew enough to see that they were confident in him and him being the starter, and he's turned out to make them look like geniuses. Getting rid
Mhm.
of the starter, like you said, with the 10-cent brain, and going with this guy that they basically have invested nothing in, and all of a sudden he's one of our most consistent guys. He's 13 out of 14, and you keep
Yeah.
waiting for this guy to fall off because of that lack of quarterback play or that lack of offensive line play, and he's just not. So I think he's definitely going to be one of the top. I think he's easily a top 10 guy instead of
Yeah.
top 12.
Yeah, I think and I think if everybody's healthy and the offensive lines are all healthy, I mean, there's a lot of guys that are big names that are not having very consistent years, but are putting up your points that you'd expect out of them. I mean, I look at guys like Kareem Hunt, who's eighth in total points, Mike Davis, who's ninth. Now, granted, that'll go away, but you've got Ronald Jones, who's 14th. He maybe not be a top 12, but he'll definitely be a top 24. Josh Jacobs, seventh in total points, but only 62% consistent. Joe Mixon was 67% consistent till he got hurt. But there's guys like Antonio Gibson, Jonathan Taylor, David Montgomery, somebody in Miami, whether it's Miles Gaskins or Salvin Ahmed. Those guys, if they get it figured out, who's going to be the number one guy there. So, and guys who are also hurt, Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb didn't play a full year. He'll be back. DeAndre Swift has looked good in his limited roles. So there's a lot of good running backs as we head into next year. And like I said, and Miles Sanders, another one that didn't really work out. Raheem Mostert, who was injured, let alone the Barkleys and the McCaffreys and everybody else who got hurt. So a lot of good players that will be heading into next year. I think there'll be some very solid depth at maybe running back position. Any of those guys that kind of Montgomery's the one that I'm kind of really high on heading into next year. I know Brad Evans will smile when I say that. It just happens to be 3 years after he had the Chubb for him during the Kings Classic. But this kid has been. I wrote it up in the article this week since Tariq Cohen went down. So last 9 weeks. Montgomery's averaging 18.8 fantasy points a week and 8 out of 9 in clutch games. That's pretty impressive for a team that has garbage for a quarterback.
Right.
So definitely like him. Any of those guys you like that, you're kind of like, I'm looking at him as a potential, not sleeper. Obviously, nobody's a sleeper anymore, but an undervalued player heading into next year that you're going to kind of have on the radar for your picks?
Well, I'm curious to see, of course, being a Colts fan, my guy Jonathan Taylor's right there. I
Yeah,
don't know
right.
necessarily if he's going to be under the radar, but I think you might see him go a little bit later than what you saw this year.
Probably round 2, round 3.
Yeah, it might slip down to round 3, which I think is a little bit more affordable. I'm interested to see what Miami does if they decide to
Yeah.
go, because Salvon Ahmed has looked solid when he's been in there, getting 20 carries a game. Last couple times he's been in there, had a 20 carry, 100-yard game last weekend in his first game back off injury. Myles Gaskin looked pretty solid there as a replacement. So I'm curious to see where they go if they try to do maybe a committee. That's a
Mm-hmm.
couple of guys that might be kind of sneaky ads, if there's enough meat left on the bone for both of them. But I think kind of in that range. Antonio Gibson's a guy that I think you'll see shoot up draft boards too, and just with his ability to make big plays. He's got a nose for the end zone. He was a touchdown machine before he went down. So I think he's a guy that if they can work out something where I think J.D. McKissic has definitely carved out a role there for sure. So I think if they can work out something where they can see equal time, where you maybe see McKissic as kind of that third down guy with a little bit of
Kind of
Gibson
like a
sprinkled
Hunt
in.
and Chubb thing.
Yeah, if they can
Yeah.
work out something like that, I think that's two guys right there in the same backfield you could really get a lot of value with. And it's one of the things that I thought was interesting too about a couple lineups that I saw, especially in Kings Classic. There was somebody that started Hunt and Nick Chubb in their lineup a
Mm-hmm.
couple weeks ago, and it worked out. And so this could be something where if you have Gibson and McKissic and it's a deep enough league, you could probably feel good starting them maybe some weeks as Gibson is your RB2, put McKissic in as your flex if it's a PPR, and you could feel pretty good about that. I'm not usually big on stacking guys in yearly leagues, especially if it's not a quarterback receiver. If it's like a running back or receiver, it's a little bit sketchy to me, but I think that's something you could probably feel good about doing.
All right. Well, obviously the biggest key in Washington is can they get a consistent quarterback? Maybe not consistent from a fantasy standpoint, just consistently behind center every week between Haskins and Smith and Kyle Allen. They were rotating a lot with injuries this year, so they need somebody to kind of just stay in there and give some stability to the
Well,
offense.
and one that can consistently stay out of strip clubs during a pandemic as well.
Yeah, did
That
you?
might be a plus.
So my friend posted that he apologized to his team for not wearing his mask in the strip club. He didn't apologize for going to the strip
Right.
club. He apologized for not wearing a mask in the strip club.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, we showed you where we're talking about 10-cent brain. All right, let's move on to the wide receiver spot. Uh, I think it's official now. If we haven't pretty much said this all year, Calvin Ridley has taken over for Julio Jones as not only the top guy in Atlanta, but one of the top receivers in the NFL, especially from a fantasy standpoint. Number one this week. He now for the year is sixth in total points, 85% consistency. Julio Jones, 39th in total points. Granted, been hurt, only 6 of 9, 67%. Doesn't suck, but yeah, Julio Jones is pretty much going to drop out of the top 12, maybe top 24 heading into next year, depending on if he stays healthy and what they decide to do with him. But definitely Ridley is the heir apparent and has taken the throne away and moving towards the top of the list. And like I said, he's now basically fourth in total consistency as well at 85%. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs still 1, 2, 3. They are still earning up. But I think, we talked a little bit about Tannehill. I think the thing that's also more amazing about the Tennessee offense is that you have A.J. Brown, who's 83% consistent, and Corey Davis, who is 75% consistent. And they're basically both in the top 10 in consistency and well, they're not. Corey Davis has missed a few games, so he's 27th in total points. A.J. Brown is 16th. But from a consistency standpoint, Tannehill is putting these two guys on the map for that. That may be something worth, if you're not going to look into Ryan Tannehill next year as your quarterback, you definitely want to look into A.J. Brown and maybe Corey Davis, who certainly has come back from the dead and became this year's Devontae Parker as potential for next year heading into 2021 drafts. Do you agree?
I do agree, and it's taken a little while, but if you look back through, a lot of first round picks at wide receiver, there's some guys that come in and they hit the ground running, like it takes them a couple games, like we talked about Justin Jefferson earlier. But
Mm-hmm.
there's some of these guys, especially if they don't have that big conference pedigree like those LSU receivers have. They come in the league, it takes them a couple years, takes them a little bit to get up to speed with the game, and that's exactly what Corey Davis has been. I believe he was 7th overall pick the year that he came out, so it's taken him a little while to get acclimated. But I think it's a guy that he's not blowing you away with total points. He's only 27th in total points,
Mm-hmm.
but he is 75% consistent. So that means he's probably a guy that you're putting maybe at your wide receiver 3. Maybe you were even lucky enough to get him as a flex, but he's
Mm-hmm.
going in that flex spot and he's giving you that consistent production every week. So he's not setting the world on fire, but
All
he's
right.
still, you look down your list, you're getting that consistent 12, 13 points from him every week, and that's what's winning you leagues.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm sure we'll have him, ranked up there and showing to folks that hey, here's a guy you can get some good value on. Don't let other people sleep on him, but he's a good value. And AJ Brown too. I mean, AJ Brown has done this now back to back years. I think he was in the 70 some percent consistency last year as well, maybe even 80. But definitely worth that. We've talked, we've also bragged a lot about Terry McLaurin being 79% consistent with nobody at quarterback. So as you talked about Antonio Gibson, same thing with McLaurin. It'll be amazing if you could ever get a consistent and good quarterback in there. Some other guys I think that have been quietly near the top of the list that may surprise some people. Well, we talked about Amari Cooper last week, 79% consistent. Brandon Ayuk, 73% consistent. Now, granted, Deebo Samuel's missed most of the year. They've also had issues with the quarterback situation, and yet Ayuk's been pretty good. They've used him in different ways. I think they've done some running with him, kind of like Kansas City does with Tyreek. Do you have any love for Ayuk heading into next year?
Absolutely. And, he's another guy that was a late first round pick. Niners, I think the Niners even maybe traded back up in the round to get him, if I remember
Mm-hmm.
right. But
Yeah.
as of late, too, it just seems like he's kind of come on. Since week 8, he's seen double digit targets every game. And, like you said, a lot of that has to do with Deebo Samuel being out, but also has to do with the fact that this guy's pretty damn good. I mean, he's, 2 consecutive weeks. saw 16 targets against Washington, 13 against Dallas, had 14 and 10 respectively against New Orleans and Seattle. So it's not, just because of injury, it's because he's pretty good. And you look at, one thing I noticed too, watching some games on Sunday, the last few weeks, Brandon Ayuk has been one of those guys crawling across the bottom of my screen, putting up these big games.
Mm-hmm.
9 for 73, 5 for 95, 7 for 75, scoring touchdowns. So I think he's another guy that you're going to see creep up the boards a little bit. But yeah, he's definitely somebody that I'm on that I'd love to see in that, maybe if you get lucky, maybe put him in that wide receiver 3 spot, but you're probably going to have to get him as your wide receiver 2. But I think if you get him there, you feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's one of the things too is, let's be honest, San Francisco, the whole team is hurt. So again, he's been doing this without Garoppolo, without a decent running game, without Deebo Samuel's on the other side, without George Kittle at tight end. I mean, basically every weapon around him has been gone for some point of the year, whether it's a couple games or the whole season. So the fact that he's doing that basically, I'll just say ad hoc type of way, just kind of making it work on his own, that shows you that this kid's got some talent. So definitely like him heading into next year. Anybody else on the list that, you look at and go, I really like what I saw this year. At times, I mean, granted, again, not a lot of consistency out of a lot of players, but certainly some guys that, have, you know, had some points in their year where they've had some good weeks, like Chase Claypool, CeeDee Lamb, a couple guys that I think of when I look at this list. T. Higgins, when Burrow was healthy, my thought is AJ Green's probably due to move on, so it's going to be Higgins and Tyler Boyd. These are the kind of guys I kind of look at and go, they've had some stretches when everybody was healthy on their teams. They looked pretty good. Anybody in there that you like that I did or didn't mention?
Well, Tyler Boyd was a guy that I was going to point out just because,
Mm-hmm.
with Joe Burrow in there, Joe Burrow looked his way a lot. And I think, like you said, AJ Green, it is time for him to move on. I think he's got a little bit left in the tank, but no
Yeah.
longer that wide receiver 1 for sure. I think he's going to move on and find a nice little niche as, maybe a wide receiver 3 somewhere, wide receiver 2. But kind of like with Ayuk, Tyler Boyd has had 3 games where he had double-digit targets, and I think 2 of those were with Joe Burrow at quarterback. Might have been all 3. I'm trying to remember what week he was hurt, but he's a guy that took some strides, and I think that he makes it a little bit easier for them to try to move AJ Green somewhere else. So I would say him. Another guy too that he's had a couple weeks where he scored some touchdowns, put a few yards up here and there. And his only problem is there's a couple of really talented guys ahead of him, especially when they're all healthy, and that's Tim Patrick. You go a little bit further down
Mm-hmm.
the line, Tim Patrick in Denver. He's only 38th in total points, but in 54% consistent. But he's had a couple games where he scored you a touchdown, and he's for the most part probably been a guy you've plucked off waivers, maybe just to kind of fill some spots on bye weeks. But it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be kind of scary when you see if KJ Hamler can figure it out. They have Cortland Sutton there. They have Jerry
Jerry Jude,
Judy. If they
right?
can get some and Noah Fant, if they can get some consistent quarterback play, that is a scary pass offense. If they can get somebody back there that's competent, or if Drew Lock can finally figure it out and get the
Mm-hmm.
ball out to all these guys. But I really like Tim Patrick as maybe kind of a late round guy that you might get a little bit underneath the radar.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, good call there. All right, let's move on to the last position. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, this position has been rough. If you didn't have Travis Kelce, T.J. Hawkinson, or Darren Waller in your draft, you're probably been hurting most of the year, or at least struggling. The total points correlation to consistency is just grossly off the charts. When you have Mike Gesicki at 8 overall in total points, Dalton Schultz in ninth, yet they're at 38 and 36% consistency. You have Gronkowski 13th, 43% consistency. You have Evan Ingram, who, and I will apologize every week until he proves me that he can get back to normal. 14th in total points, 50% consistency. Eric Ebron is 12th in total points, dude. That just blows me away. Where in the hell did that come from? um, so he's 12th in total points. God,
He's
50% consistent.
he's trying to channel that Indianapolis season from a couple
I
years ago, I
guess.
guess. I don't know.
I thought he was left for dead weeks ago, and all of a sudden now he's in the top 12. Noah Fant, 11th, 54%. Mark Andrews is sixth in total points at 58%. Yet Logan Thomas is fifth. So Logan Thomas is fifth. Uh, and Robert Tanyan is third. These are two guys that weren't even drafted by anybody, and they're third and fifth in total tight ends, total points. 64% for Tanyan, our favorite Indiana State representative. Logan Thomas, I know a favorite of David Katari on here, 57% consistent. Hunter Henry, 7th, 64%. Jonnu Smith, 10th, 62%. Even Darren Waller, second in total points. I had an interesting stat that I put in here. So Darren Waller is in second place in total points. He is 53 points behind Travis Kelce, who's in first. However, he's 64 points ahead of third place. How about that? So there's a 60-point gap basically between first, second, and second to third. So do the math. That's 120 points between first and third, which we all know is Kelce. But yeah, it's just amazing to me that there's this kind of disparity. And, like we said before, if you don't go out and get Kelce in round 1, round 2, round 3, if you get him round 3, God bless you. I don't think he makes it that far. He may not make it out of round 1 this coming year. It wouldn't surprise me if I see Kelce in half of our drafts going to round 1. Would you be surprised?
Not at all. And you mentioned David. David's the he's the guy that screams this the loudest. Get him, and he's such a difference maker, and he is. I mean, he's we talk about, and I don't know where he's at this week, but he's probably a top 10 receiver. So
who Kelce?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was 4th this week. It was a down week.
Okay, so there you go. So you're basically getting the 4th wide receiver as your tight end, and no one else is going to even come within 65 points of that.
Yeah, so if you put Travis Kelce's total fantasy points in the wide receiver position, he's only 10 points out of second place behind Devontae Adams.
So there you go.
Right.
There you go. And in that offense with Patrick Mahomes slinging it to him,
right.
There's no reason that he's not going to go in that first round, and rightfully so.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I would feel comfortable if I'm at the end of round 1, like whether it's, 10th, 11th, 12th, flipping Kelce and Mahomes right off the bat. I'll find depth at wide receiver. I'll find depth at running back. They're out there. I mean, because at that point you realize you're probably missing your top 6, 7 running backs. You're probably going to not have Adams, Michael Thomas, maybe Tyreek, or even that combination. You take Tyreek and Kelce, or I mean, it's just how do you not just invest as much as you can in Kansas City? Maybe you go Tyreek and Kelce, and at the end of round 1, round 2, beginning of round 2, maybe you get lucky. And at 3-4, Mahomes makes it to you. I would have no problem doing that. I realize you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket, but that's a big-ass basket. That's the way I look at it, I mean, right now, Kelce is number 1 in fantasy, for tight ends. Tyreek is number 1 in wide receivers, and Mahomes is number 1 in, I mean, why would you not do that?
Right.
I mean, I know you could, everybody would argue, oh, you never take quarterbacks early and wait and wait. Well, I got consistency numbers that says don't wait.
Yeah.
Because, you could, if you took Lamar Jackson early, it didn't work out for you. But Mahomes, outside of his, being injured last year, still put up solid numbers, but was injured. He's going to be 80, 90, 85 to 95% consistent. He's going to be top 5 in total points. Kelce's going to be top 5. Tyreek's going to be a top 10 at least. And again, you fill in the gaps around it. Get Austin Eckler's and David Montgomery's, and I don't know. So it's already starting to click in my brain for the magazine. But it's hard to argue, isn't it?
It is, and that's the main thing that we talked about with, the depth of running back. And I don't necessarily have any Chiefs in this team that I'm made it to the championship game in the Kings Classic. But
Right.
let me just illustrate the fact that you can do this with now. These are the running backs on my current roster right now: Naheem Hines, Leonard Fournette, J.D. McKissick, Mike Davis, Zeke Elliott, and Kalen Balaj. So that goes to tell you a couple things. Number one, there are guys every single year, and not
Mm-hmm.
just a running back, but it seems like it happens the most at running back.
And
There are
wide
going to be
receivers.
guys that are going to
Yeah.
become available as the season comes on.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to come out of nowhere. The Salvon Ahmeds, the James Robinsons of the year. You're going to get guys to plug into those spots. So if you go with those Chiefs in those first few rounds, like we said when we were at the running back spot, you just named all the guys that you could maybe come out of there with, and
Mm-hmm.
some of those names that you mentioned, if you compare them with Kelsey and Mahomes, or Kelsey and Hill, or even if you
Right.
go, Mahomes and whatever combination, you're still going to have solid depth at running back that you can mix and match and make up for that, because you're going to get it. Illustrates just that fact so much more, that you have such an advantage at tight end. You can afford to mix and match your running backs every week, and even if
Yep.
you miss on one and hit on one, you're still going to be fine.
Right. Right. And then at wide receiver, in rounds whatever 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you can get Tyler Boyd's, maybe Justin Jefferson's, Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Keenan Allen. Remember, Keenan Allen was going in the 6th, 7th round this past
Mhm.
year. He's number 7 in total points this year. Everybody said he was washed up. So yeah, I mean, I just feel like you got to go with consistency, and you're not going to get any better consistency than those three Chiefs. Hell, if you get Edwards-Helaire in there somehow, you could really kick bass, but that you're not going to get all of them. You might be able to pull off a Hill, Kelsey, Mahomes in 1, 2, 3, maybe, but it'd be tough. So, but like I said, who knows? Hell, we might see Kelsey go 6th, 7th overall this year.
Yeah, I think you do. I think you do.
And I'm not even talking about tight end. Those tight end leagues where you get 1.5 points. God, he may go top 3.
He may be the first guy off the board. You never know.
Yeah, here, let me just for some giggles go in. I've got the Big Guy Fantasy Sports consistency report here, and for those of always following us along, you can go in there and change the scoring method. So I'm going to change this to 1.5 receptions, recalculate. And that would put Kelsey at 304, 94% consistency. Still, believe it or not, still only 40 points ahead of Darren Waller in that case. You hear something funny? Oh, wait a minute. I'm looking at the wrong year. I'm like, wait a minute. How is Kittle that high up? All right, there we go. Kelsey, 338, so he'd be 50 ahead of Darren Waller. The distance between first and third is 150 points. But he would have 338. Now let's change this to the wide receiver position. And it's still at 1.5 receptions. But again, that's 1.5 receptions for tight ends. Now I'm going to change it back to 1. So we know that 335, that would put him in first place. So if you're in a tight end premium league, I mean, I don't think I have to tell anybody this, but he's higher than any of the wide receivers by far. He would be right now, again, 20 points ahead of Tyreek Hill. There we go. So, yeah. So, I mean, then you have to go, factor in, do you pick him ahead of, other running backs and that kind of stuff? So he, tight end premium, he could go first. And it's hard to argue. Again, Dalvin Cook is at 318. Kamara's at 321, so that's your highest. So yeah, he would be the highest point total out of all positions. So you could pick him number 1 and be not that really out of whack, especially if you throw in the scarcity scenario of that position. Kind of like really good catchers in fantasy baseball. I mean, it's interesting, but I think it's been certainly not. I'm not going to look at somebody and go, "You're an idiot. Why would you do that?" Like, yeah, okay, I get it. You got to build around it, but yeah, I get it. So anyway, All righty, so there we are. We're heading into the championship week. Best of luck to everybody out there. Definitely Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all. To all of our listeners, thanks to everybody for listening this year. We'll definitely be back, I assume, next week, kind of a week 17 wrap up, talk about championship games, kind of talk about the end of the year, what we're planning on for next year. But we'll definitely be back. So, Ron, any final thoughts where they can find you and kind of shout out to everybody?
Yeah, just enjoy the holiday coming up. Enjoy the friends, the family. Stay safe out there, and you will come. We'll come back with some stuff for you this week. Hopefully, I'll be talking about how I'm able to pull out a Kings Classic championship.
Yes, that
We'll
would
see
be
what
awesome.
happens. So, anyway, come check us out at BigGuyFantasySports.com. Check out Consistently Cashing. Man, I don't know what the pay line for last week must have been insane because my lineup did well, still did not cash, but we gave you some good names out there, including J.D. McKissick. Gave you that one last week. So if
Nice.
you mixed and matched a little bit between Colby's and I, you probably did okay for yourself. But hopefully we'll get that ship righted this coming week. And check out Big Guy Fantasy Sports in the next couple of days so I can recap what happened in the last round of the Kings Classic playoffs for each one of our divisions, and then that way you can see who's going to be playing for those titles in all three of the Jim Brown, the George Blanda, and the Lynn Dawson divisions coming up this weekend.
Got it. All right. Well, as always, as you said, we can follow us at Big Guy Fantasy Sports. I just posted up all the articles tonight for last week's review preview as we head into this week. And thanks again to everybody for being a part of this, Ron. Thanks for being here. David is still out sick. Him and his mom have had COVID, and they're fighting it off. They're both doing okay, but certainly the mom's struggling a little bit more. But we send out our thoughts and prayers to David and his mom out there. Get better, get safe. He's hoping to be back next week for a end of the year wrap up. So we'll hope to have David back in full swing. So once again, for Ron, I am Bob Lung. Everybody, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We will talk to you soon.